The dinner rush was roaring, tables packed, silverware clattering, customers shouting, but none of it covered the sound that shattered her world. A single sentence, from the man who once promised her forever. "I don't want a barren wife, Emily. I deserve a family. You can't give me that." He said it calmly, almost casually, as if he wasn't breaking her apart right there on the greasy tiles of the restaurant kitchen. Emily didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stood there, hands still trembling from rushing plates, watching her husband of 7 years walk out without looking back. The staff pretended not to stare, but one pair of eyes didn't look away. A man at table 9, quiet, brooding, surrounded by 5 children who sat perfectly still, like they'd been trained their whole lives to read danger in silence. Nobody knew his name, but everyone whispered it. The man who ran half the city, the widowed Mafia boss, the father who lost his wife and had been raising 5 children alone. He watched Emily wipe her tears, straighten her apron, and force herself back to work like nothing had happened. And then he made a decision that would change her fate forever. He stood up, walked to the counter, looked her in the eyes, and said the words that froze the entire restaurant. "You may not have a family, but my children just chose you. Stay with me until the end." Because what happened after that moment turned a rejected waitress into the most unexpected member of a Mafia dynasty. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Emily Chen had believed in fairy tales once, 7 years ago, when David swept her off her feet with promises of forever and dreams painted in watercolors. He was everything her traditional parents had hoped for: stable, ambitious, respectable, a marketing executive with clean hands and cleaner intentions, or so she thought. The fertility struggles began in year 3, month after month of negative pregnancy tests, doctor visits that felt like confessions, treatments that drained their savings and her spirit. David started working later, coming home quieter. His touch became mechanical, purposeful, transactional. "We'll figure this out," he kept saying. But his eyes told a different story. Emily threw herself into work at Romano's family restaurant, the kind of place where regulars knew your name and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. She could serve tables with a smile that never revealed the emptiness growing inside her chest. The physical emptiness. The emotional void that widened every time David looked at other couples with their children. What Emily didn't know was that Table 9 had been watching her story unfold for months. Vincent Torino wasn't supposed to care about waitresses. Men in his position, men who controlled territories and settled disputes with more than words, didn't concern themselves with the personal lives of restaurant staff. But something about the woman with sad eyes and steady hands had captured his attention. Maybe it was the way she never flinched when his usual clientele filled the back booths. Drug dealers, loan sharks, enforcers, they all came to Romano's because Vincent did. And Vincent came because it was the only place in the city where his 5 children could eat dinner without bodyguards hovering over every bite. His kids were aged 6 to 14. All of them scarred by loss, all of them learning to navigate a world where their father's name carried weight and danger in equal measure. Maria, his oldest at 14, had stepped into a mother role she never asked for. The twins, Carlos and Sofia, were 10 and as different as night and day. One withdrawn, one rebellious. Little Marco was 8 and still asked when Mama was coming home. And baby Isabella, just 6, barely remembered the woman who gave birth to her. They'd been coming to Romano's every Tuesday and Friday for 8 months. Always Table 9. Always the same order. And always served by Emily, who seemed to understand that these children needed normalcy more than they needed conversation. She never asked questions when Maria helped cut Marco's food. Never commented when Carlos refused to make eye contact. Never pushed when Isabella only whispered her drink order. Emily just served them like they were any other family, giving them the gift of invisibility in a world where being Vincent Torino's children made them perpetual targets. Vincent noticed everything. It was how he'd survived 20 years in a business where observation meant the difference between life and death. He noticed how Emily's wedding ring had grown loose over the months, how she'd started twisting it when she was nervous. He noticed the way her husband would sometimes pick her up after shifts, the conversations through car windows that ended with her shoulders sagging. He noticed the night David stopped coming altogether. But what Vincent noticed most was how his children responded to Emily. Maria actually smiled when Emily complimented her help with the younger ones. Carlos made eye contact when she remembered he liked extra cheese on his pizza. Sophia stopped being sarcastic long enough to ask Emily about her day. Marco showed her drawings on napkins. And Isabella, sweet, quiet Isabella, who barely spoke to anyone outside the family, had started saving her best jokes for Emily. "She's nice, Papa," Isabella had whispered one evening as they walked to the car. "She makes me feel safe." Safe. In Vincent's world, that word was currency. It was the one thing money couldn't buy and power couldn't guarantee. Yet somehow, this waitress who was falling apart behind her smile had managed to create it for his children. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Vincent sat at his usual spot, reading reports disguised as a newspaper, while his children ate and did homework. The restaurant buzzed with its typical dinner crowd. Families, couples, workers grabbing quick meals before night shifts. Emily moved through it all with practiced efficiency, but Vincent could see the cracks forming. Her smile was more forced. Her hands shook slightly when she poured coffee. Something was building toward a breaking point, and Vincent found himself watching her more carefully than usual. That's when David arrived. Vincent had seen him before. The husband who'd stopped caring, stopped trying, stopped seeing the woman he'd married. David walked into Romano's that night with the purposeful stride of a man who'd made a decision, not a good one. He didn't wait for a table, didn't acknowledge the hostess. He walked straight to the kitchen entrance where Emily was picking up orders, and Vincent knew immediately that whatever was about to happen would shatter more than just dishes. The conversation was brief, brutal, efficient in its cruelty. Vincent couldn't hear every word over the restaurant noise, but he caught enough. Barren, deserve better. Moving on. The clinical language of a man discarding something he'd decided was defective. Emily stood frozen as her world collapsed in the space between the prep station and the walk-in cooler. 7 years reduced to a grocery list of inadequacies. Her dreams filed away like rejected loan applications. And then David was gone, just like that. No goodbye, no apology, no acknowledgement of the woman who'd built her entire life around loving him. The restaurant had gone quiet without realizing it. Conversations died as people sensed the shift in energy, the way animals know when storms are coming. Emily stood there for 10 seconds that felt like hours, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. Then she did something that made Vincent's chest tighten with unexpected respect. She straightened her apron, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, picked up the order she'd been collecting, and walked back into the dining room like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and Vincent Torino, a man who'd built an empire on reading people and predicting their breaking points, realized he was about to make the most impulsive decision of his carefully calculated life. Vincent watched Emily serve 3 more tables with mechanical precision, her movements sharp and controlled, like someone fighting to stay upright in a hurricane. Every gesture screamed of a woman barely holding herself together, yet she refused to break. Not here, not in front of strangers. But Vincent Torino hadn't built his reputation by ignoring opportunities when they presented themselves. And this moment, watching a woman demonstrate the kind of strength his world rarely produced, felt like destiny knocking on his door. He leaned toward Maria, his eldest, who was helping Isabella with her math homework. "What do you think of Miss Emily?" Maria glanced up, her 14-year-old eyes already too wise for her age. "She's always kind to us, Papa, even when we're difficult. She remembers that I don't like mushrooms," Carlos added quietly, the 10-year-old twin who usually avoided conversations entirely. And she draws smiley faces on my napkins, Isabella whispered, her small voice barely audible over the restaurant chatter. Vincent nodded slowly. His children had spoken. In his world, family loyalty meant everything, and his kids had just given Emily their seal of approval without realizing it. He stood up, the movement causing several nearby tables to glance over nervously. Vincent Torino didn't make casual gestures. When he moved, it meant something was about to change. The walk to the counter felt like crossing a battlefield. Every step carried the weight of a decision that would ripple through both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Emily was restocking napkin dispensers, her hands moving with the desperate efficiency of someone trying to outrun their thoughts. "Excuse me," Vincent said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made grown men confess their sins. Emily looked up, and for the first time in months of serving his table, their eyes met directly. Hers were red-rimmed but fierce, like a wounded animal that refused to show weakness. "Is there something wrong with your order, Mr. Torino?" So she knew his name. Vincent felt something shift in his chest. Most people pretended not to know who he was, scared that acknowledgement would somehow implicate them in his world. But Emily said it simply, without fear or judgment. "The order was perfect, as always." Vincent paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I couldn't help noticing you've had a difficult evening." Emily's jaw tightened. "I'm fine. Just a personal matter." "Personal matters have a way of becoming professional problems in my experience." Vincent leaned against the counter, his presence commanding attention from everyone within earshot. "Tell me something, Miss Emily. Do you have family? People who take care of you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Emily's composure cracked for just a moment, revealing the raw pain underneath. "Not anymore." Vincent nodded as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "My children have been watching you for months. They've grown fond of you. In my world, that's not something that happens easily." Emily glanced toward table 9, where 5 pairs of eyes were indeed watching this exchange with intense curiosity. Maria was gripping her pencil so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The twins sat perfectly still, reading the tension in the air. Marco and Isabella leaned forward like they were watching the most important movie of their lives. "They're good kids," Emily said softly. "You should be proud." "I am. But they need more than pride. They need stability. They need someone who understands that family isn't always about blood." Vincent's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "And I need someone who can give them what I can't." Emily stared at him, confusion flickering across her features. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm not asking anything yet. I'm making an observation." Vincent straightened, his full height imposing even in the casual setting of a family restaurant. "You've just lost everything that mattered to you. Your husband, your marriage, probably your home and your future as you imagined it. Am I wrong?" Emily's silence was answer enough. "My children lost their mother 2 years ago. Cancer. She fought for 18 months before it took her." Vincent's voice carried a pain that money and power couldn't touch. "Since then, I've watched them try to be adults when they should still be children. Maria makes breakfast and braids Isabella's hair. Carlos holds Marco when he has nightmares about his mama. They're surviving, but they're not living." "I'm sorry for your loss," Emily whispered, and Vincent could hear that she meant it. "They light up when you serve our table. Did you know that? Isabella talks about you at home. Carlos asks if we can come here on days when it's not our usual schedule. They've been waiting for someone like you without even knowing it." Emily shook her head slowly. "Mr. Torino, I don't know what you think I can offer them, but I'm nobody special. I'm just a waitress whose husband decided she wasn't worth keeping." "Your husband was an idiot." The words came out harder than Vincent intended, causing several nearby conversations to pause. He lowered his voice again. "But his mistake doesn't define your worth. My children see something in you that he was too blind to appreciate." "What are you suggesting?" Vincent reached into his jacket, a movement that made the restaurant's security camera operators probably reach for panic buttons. But he only pulled out a business card, placing it carefully on the counter between them. I'm suggesting that sometimes broken people can build something stronger together than they ever could separately. He met her eyes again. I'm suggesting that maybe what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. Emily stared at the card without touching it. Simple black text on cream paper. A name, a phone number, nothing more. I don't know anything about your world, she said finally. And I don't know anything about yours. But we both know about protecting the people we love. We both understand what it means to keep going when everything falls apart. Vincent glanced back at his children, who were still watching with rapt attention. They chose you months ago. Tonight, when they saw you hurting, they asked me if we could help you. Children see things adults miss. Emily looked toward table 9, where Isabella was now waving shyly. Maria offered a small, encouraging smile. Even Carlos managed a brief nod of acknowledgement. I have nothing to offer them, Emily said, her voice breaking slightly. I couldn't even keep my own husband happy. You offer them something I can't buy or command. You make them feel normal, safe, like they're just regular kids having dinner with their father, instead of the children of Vincent Torino. He paused, letting the weight of his name settle. In my world, that's more valuable than gold. Emily finally picked up the card, her fingers trembling as she read the simple information. If I called this number, what would happen? We'd talk. You'd meet my family properly. You'd see our home, understand what I'm really offering. Vincent's voice softened. And you'd have time to decide if broken people like us can build something worth saving. The restaurant continued buzzing around them, but their conversation felt suspended in its own bubble of possibility. Emily looked again at the children, who had somehow chosen her without her realizing it. 5 young faces that had found something in her that her own husband had declared worthless. This is crazy, she whispered. Sometimes crazy is the only thing that makes sense. Vincent stepped back from the counter, giving her space to breathe. Keep the card. Think about it. But don't take too long to decide. In my experience, opportunities like this don't wait around forever. He turned to go, then paused. Emily, your husband said you couldn't give him a family. He was wrong. You already have one. You've just been serving them dinner twice a week without knowing it. Vincent walked back to table 9, leaving Emily standing at the counter with his card clutched in her trembling fingers. The weight of his words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Papa, is Miss Emily coming home with us? Isabella's voice carried across the restaurant with the innocent hope only children possess. Not tonight, Piccola, Vincent replied, settling back into his chair. But maybe soon. Emily watched this exchange, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the span of 20 minutes, her entire world had been dismantled and reconstructed. David's rejection had left her feeling worthless, discarded like yesterday's newspaper. But Vincent Torino had just offered her something she'd never expected. Purpose, belonging, a chance to matter to someone again. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She moved through the motions of serving tables, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, but her mind kept drifting to the business card in her apron pocket. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward table 9, where the Torino family finished their meal with the same quiet efficiency they'd shown for months. When they finally stood to leave, each child made a point of saying goodbye. Maria offered a shy wave. The twins nodded respectfully. Marco grinned and gave her a thumbs up, and Isabella ran over to press a folded napkin into Emily's hand. I drew this for you, the little girl whispered. It's us having a tea party. Emily unfolded the napkin to find a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures sitting at a small table, surrounded by hearts and flowers. One figure had long, dark hair like Emily's. The other had Isabella's distinctive pigtails. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Emily managed, her voice thick with emotion. Vincent appeared beside his daughter, placing a protective hand on Isabella's shoulder. Say goodnight, Bella. Miss Emily has work to finish. Good night, Miss Emily, Isabella said solemnly. I hope you call Papa. As the family filed out of the restaurant, Emily felt something crack open inside her chest. Not the painful breaking she'd experienced earlier, but something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The rest of the evening crawled by. Emily's co-workers kept shooting her curious glances, clearly having witnessed the interaction with Vincent Torino, but too intimidated to ask questions. In their world, you didn't gossip about men like Vincent. You minded your own business and hoped to stay invisible. But Emily couldn't stay invisible anymore. Not after what had happened. Not after being offered a lifeline she'd never imagined possible. By closing time, she'd made her decision. She drove to the address printed on Vincent's card, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. The house sat in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, a sprawling Mediterranean-style estate surrounded by high walls and discreet security cameras. It was the kind of home that whispered power and money in equal measure. Emily almost turned around 3 times before finally pulling into the circular driveway. This was insane. She was a waitress from the wrong side of town, about to knock on the door of one of the most dangerous men in the city. What could she possibly offer his children that their father's wealth couldn't provide? But then she remembered Isabella's drawing, still folded carefully in her pocket. She remembered Maria's smile when she'd complimented her help with the younger children. She remembered Carlos making eye contact for the first time in months. She remembered Vincent's words, "They chose you months ago." The front door opened before she could knock. Vincent stood there in casual clothes, jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look more approachable than his restaurant attire. But his eyes still held that calculating intensity that marked him as someone not to be underestimated. "I wondered if you'd come tonight," he said simply. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said." Emily's voice came out steadier than she felt, about broken people building something stronger together. Vincent stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The foyer was elegant but not ostentatious, decorated with family photos rather than expensive art. Emily could see the children's personalities reflected in the space. Isabella's drawings hung on a bulletin board. Soccer trophies lined a shelf. A pile of homework sat on a side table. "They're upstairs doing homework," Vincent explained, leading her into a comfortable living room. "But they know you're here." Isabella's been peeking out her bedroom window since 7 o'clock, waiting for headlights in the driveway. Emily sank into a leather armchair, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was considering. "I don't know anything about being a mother figure. I couldn't even keep my own husband interested. Your husband was a fool who couldn't see what was right in front of him." Vincent's voice carried a hardness that reminded Emily exactly who she was dealing with. "But my children aren't blind. They see your strength, your kindness, your ability to make them feel normal in a world that constantly reminds them they're different." "What exactly are you asking of me?" Vincent sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his attention focused entirely on her face. "I'm asking you to be part of our family, not as hired help, not as a temporary solution, but as someone who belongs here, someone who cares about these kids as much as I do. And in return, you get a home, security, a chance to be the mother you always wanted to be, just not in the way you expected." Vincent paused, his expression softening. "And you get 5 children who already love you, even if they don't fully understand what that means yet." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. After years of fertility treatments and disappointments, after being told she was worthless because she couldn't conceive, here was a man offering her the one thing she'd always wanted, a family. "There's something else," Vincent continued, his voice dropping lower. "This isn't just about the children. What I saw in you tonight, the way you held yourself together when everything fell apart, that's not something I encounter often in my world. You have a strength that can't be bought or commanded. And frankly, I need that as much as my children do." Emily met his gaze, seeing something vulnerable beneath the controlled exterior. Vincent Torino, the man who commanded respect through fear and power, was admitting he needed help. He was trusting her with his most precious possessions, his children. "What about your work, your other life?" Emily asked carefully. "That stays separate, always. My children don't know the details of what I do, and they never will. What I'm offering you is a chance to be part of the safe space I've built for them." The normal life I try to give them, despite everything else. Emily thought about her empty apartment, her failed marriage, her job serving tables to people who barely saw her as human. Then she thought about Isabella's shy waves, Maria's grateful smiles, the way all 5 children had somehow claimed her without her realizing it. If I say yes, what happens next? Vincent leaned forward, his intensity focusing like a laser. You move in this weekend. We tell the children you're going to be living here, helping take care of them. We figure out the rest as we go. Just like that? Emily, I've built an empire by recognizing opportunities and acting on them quickly. What I'm offering you is the chance to build something real, something lasting, something that matters more than money or power or any of the other things people think they want. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. When she opened them again, Vincent was still watching her with that patient intensity. Your children really chose me? From the first night you served our table, they started asking when we could come back to the nice ladies' restaurant. Isabella practices conversations with you in the mirror. Maria defends you when other kids at school make jokes about waitresses. They've been preparing for you to be part of our lives without even knowing it. Emily felt something break open in her chest. But this time it wasn't pain. It was possibility. Hope. The chance to matter to someone again. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Vincent's smile was the first genuine expression she'd seen from him all evening. The children are going to be over the moon. Can I see them, just for a minute? Vincent stood, extending his hand to help her up. They're probably all crowded around the top of the stairs listening anyway. Subtlety isn't exactly their strong suit. As they walked toward the staircase, Emily heard the sound of quickly retreating footsteps and muffled whispers. By the time they reached the second floor, all 5 children were standing in the hallway in their pajamas, trying to look casual and failing miserably. Miss Emily! Isabella broke ranks first, launching herself into Emily's arms with the fearless abandon of a 6-year-old who'd just gotten her dearest wish. Hey, sweetheart, Emily murmured, holding the little girl close. I hear you've been waiting for me. Are you going to live here now? Marco asked, his 8-year-old face bright with hope. Papa said you might be our new family, Sophia added, the rebellious twin suddenly looking younger than her 10 years. Emily looked at Vincent, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. If you'll have me, I'd very much like to be part of your family. The hallway erupted in cheers and hugs and excited chatter about room arrangements and breakfast preferences and 100 other details that suddenly mattered enormously. Emily found herself in the center of a whirlwind of acceptance and joy, feeling more wanted than she had in years. Over the chaos, she caught Vincent's eye. He was leaning against the wall, watching his children embrace their new reality with something that looked suspiciously like relief on his face. Emily Chen had woken up that morning as a rejected wife, with no prospects and no hope. She was ending it as the chosen mother of 5 children, who needed her as much as she needed them. Sometimes the most unexpected endings turned out to be the most perfect beginnings. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5 in the morning, practicing how to braid hair. Her fingers fumbled with the sections, dropping strands and starting over for the 10th time. Isabella would be awake soon, expecting the same perfect French braid her mother used to do. The house felt different in the pre-dawn quiet, less intimidating, more like the home Vincent had promised it could become. Emily had moved in the previous weekend with nothing but 2 suitcases and a heart full of terrified hope. Now her clothes hung in the walk-in closet of what used to be the guest room. Her books lined the shelves, and her coffee mug sat in the kitchen cabinet next to 5 smaller ones decorated with cartoon characters. The transformation hadn't been seamless. Marco still called for his papa when he had nightmares, forgetting that Emily was there now. Sophia tested boundaries daily, pushing to see if this new mother figure would abandon them like everyone else seemed to. Carlos watched Emily with the suspicious eyes of a child who'd learned not to trust promises from adults. But there were victories too, small ones that felt monumental. Isabella had started climbing into Emily's bed on Saturday mornings for cartoons and pancakes. Maria had shyly asked for help with her algebra homework, admitting she'd been struggling alone for months. Even Carlos had begun leaving his drawings on the kitchen counter where Emily would see them, though he still pretended not to care when she praised his work. Vincent remained an enigma. Professional during the day, disappeared into his study for phone calls. Emily learned not to interrupt, but surprisingly present in the evenings. He helped with homework, refereed sibling arguments, and tucked the younger ones into bed with the patience of a man who'd been doing this alone for too long. Emily caught glimpses of the father beneath the reputation, the man who read bedtime stories in different voices and remembered which child needed extra reassurance after bad dreams. They danced around each other carefully, two adults learning to share space and responsibility without stepping on emotional landmines. Vincent never pushed for more than Emily was ready to give, and Emily tried not to analyze the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at something she'd done for the children. The morning routine had become their testing ground. 5 children, 5 different personalities, 5 sets of needs to navigate before 7:30 school departure. Emily had quickly learned that Marco needed his cereal in a specific bowl, that Sophia would only eat toast cut into triangles, that Carlos required absolute silence during breakfast, or he'd shut down completely. She was getting better at it. The chaos felt less overwhelming now, more like a complex dance she was finally learning the steps to. But this morning felt different, heavier. Vincent had been on edge the night before, taking 3 separate phone calls that sent him pacing into his study with increasingly sharp voices. Emily finished her braid practice and headed downstairs to start breakfast. The kitchen was already occupied. Vincent sat at the island with a cup of black coffee and a newspaper, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually immaculate appearance showed signs of a sleepless night. "Good morning," Emily said softly, not wanting to startle him from whatever thoughts were consuming him. Emily's story proves that sometimes our greatest rejections become our most unexpected blessings. A woman told she was worthless found her worth in 5 children who chose her heart over biology. Vincent found the missing piece his family desperately needed, and together, they built something stronger than either could have imagined alone. Because real family isn't about the children you carry, it's about the love you choose to give.